Ladies and gentlemen.
Hello there, coward.
You are now listening to Retro Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Retro Radio, your weekly online real-player source of news and information on classic arcade gaming, brought to you by MonroeWorld.com. I'm Shane R. Monroe, your host. Welcome to the program. If you're here expecting to hear the cool interview, it isn't here yet. Since I have let one cat out of the bag already on Insert Coins news area, I can divulge it here as well. One of the two killer interviews I have been pursuing, which have been promised when time permits, is one with the president of Digital Leisure, makers of the new DVD and Windows 95 re-releases of Dragon's Lair and Space Ace. This company, formerly known as ReadySoft, offers gamers something we've never had before: 100% perfect recreations of these classic Laserdisc games. They've been working closely with other Laserdisc game copyright owners to bring us other games too, like the much-awaited Cliffhanger and Thayer's Quest. He's worked closely with the original Don Bluth team, and the company plans on adding interviews and other goodies to future releases, so we have that to look forward to in the future. However, until he gets free time to do the interview, I'm afraid I'm going to have to look for something else to do. In the meantime, let's update with RetroCade. Beta 1 of version 1.1 is not out yet, but anticipated this weekend with a few new games, including Dig Dug, Galaga, Power Drive, and others. Most of the 1.0 release bugs have been squished, and they're planning on adding the video game history pack file to this release, allowing the user not only to play the games, but learn about their origins and trivia as well. I, for one, am looking very forward to this. Other goodies like the Riva 128 video card bug, the Discs of Tron Level 7 bug have been fixed, scanline support, and some other goodies. It's already looking like a cool recent release, and I haven't even seen it yet. For those of you who may have missed it, there is a nude Retro Babe patch to allow you to see RetroCade's Retro Babe in, shall we say, all of her glory. Our bud Tim over at arcadeathome.com has created the patch, so nip over to his site and download it if this is something that interests you. Hey, don't blame me, I'm just the messenger. There is always the no splash screen option for those of you who don't even want to see a fully clothed woman, nipples or not. Nipples or not. Now to update with MAME, which is now version 0.34 Beta 4. And I must say these guys are doing great things for us. First off, is Beta 4, quote, worth it? I've been hanging out on IRC quite a bit lately, and let's just say that the excitement over MAME releases should be considered rather non-existent these days. However, those of you who, like me, are discussing with Neo Geo Game Editions will be very happy with this release. Not so much for games that it added, but the games that it fixed in various ways. More on that later. Let's run down some of the new games first. Most talked about is Arm Wrestling, a Nintendo game running on Super Punch-Out hardware that pits you against many opponents you may recognize from Punch-Out and Super Punch-Out. I haven't played the game emulated, but I remember it in the arcade. It seems to be the big game of this release. Also of honorable mention, Mr. TNT, Tiger Heli, Turbo, but it's preliminary, don't expect to play it, Arkanoid 2, the Discs of Tron upright version, Dynamic Ducks, lots of Sega games like Quartet 2, Alien Syndrome, etc., but they're not working yet, Wonder Boy Monster Lair, and Wrestle War. This version also offers preliminary backdrop support for Discs of Tron. Be sure to look at the what's new.txt file for more information on how to enable it. So what do I mean about old games being fixed? Well, let's talk about sound for a minute. I don't know about everybody else, but for me, audio often makes a difference to me whether I'll like or dislike a game. Case in point, let's take two modern-day examples, Half-Life and Unreal. Two very cool first-person 3D shooters, basically. Both graphic engines are amazing. Half-Life uses a modified Quake 2 engine, although you won't recognize it as such, and Unreal uses its own new engine. While Unreal's graphic engine is nothing short of stunning, on the right hardware anyway, and the other elements like AI are fantastic, its sound quality is just okay. Now look at Half-Life. A slightly dated graphic engine, but very, very well used and modified. Excellent AI and storyline elements, plus more involvement with the game elements themselves. Half-Life's strongest suit, however, over the others of a genre, is its incredible sound system. Using a software-based digital sound processor, the sound is so much better, cleaner, and more accurate than in any game I've ever played. Audio follows you around properly as you move. As you move from one end of the room to another, the speaker noises within the room would change properly. Or as you walk by people, their conversation moves around you properly as you'd expect it to. The surrounding size and material makeup actually alter the sounds that are heard. In other words, footsteps sound different in a hallway than in a cave or a large room. This sound engine simply took my breath away, and I found Half-Life a better game than Unreal because of it. Now let's look at emulation in general. First, this isn't an intent to put down any EMU without sound or partial sound. I couldn't write an EMU if I tried, and your efforts should be saluted. However, games like Rastan and Ninja Warriors just aren't the same game without sound and music. Some games, like Gorf, in fact, aren't nearly as much fun to play without Gorf bitching at you and telling you your demise is near, blah, 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 blah. So when I say that the MAME team has fixed older games this release, I mean sound fixes. First, Donkey Kong finally supports accurate sound. I must say I've been waiting for this since they dumped sample support. Although I haven't found a Donkey set that actually works yet, not even Dave's, I eagerly look forward to playing this old game again with the benefits of accurate sound. There's now sound in all working System 16 games. That is no arbitrary feat there. It's hats off to Phil for that one. Finally, a huge thanks, big huge thanks. I'll send you my firstborn, or wait a minute, this will be my secondborn child. A huge thanks to Frank and Kevin for getting the Astrocade sound chip emulated. We now have sound in Gorf and Wizard of War. Yes, thank God for that. Gorf is simply a different game with its sound effects intact. Frankly, this is my absolute favorite part of this release. Screw arm wrestling, give me sound in Gorf any day. Also of note, a few more high-score save routines are in place, and Blasto and Discs of Tron, of course, have been fixed. There are many other additions and changes, too. It is worth looking over the README and what's new.txt file, as it always is. Now for my feature of the week, how to get started collecting arcade games. One of the most asked questions I get is, how do I start collecting my own arcade games? Well, there are many facts on the internet about how to go about getting started. However, these always seem to point to resources that make reference to things that poor secluded folks like me don't have access to, like auctions and large warehouse clearances. How do folks in non-metropolitan areas, or those of us not living in Jersey, New York, or Pennsylvania, get games? Let me relay to you how I got started. First of all, I was a very jealous individual. Most of my friends in IRC already had video games. Me, living in BFE, Washington, didn't figure I could ever score a game without a major road trip. It was actually a complete accident that I ended up with my first game, Gauntlet II. I was trying to build an arcade controller for my PC. Couldn't afford a V-stick, don't have $80, so I decided to get a gutted control panel and go to work. Well, I looked up coin-op vendors in the Yellow Pages and only found one guy in the area. So I contacted him directly. The facts all warn that operators don't usually like private collectors, so I was hesitant. But nothing could be further from the truth. He was very nice, so I could come up and pick through his stuff and see if there was anything I wanted. Well, things got busy and I never made it up. I called a few weeks later and we got to talking about arcade gaming. I asked him how many games he had on his route, etc. We got around to talking about older machines he might consider selling. He mentioned he had a Gauntlet machine, at this time I assumed an original Gauntlet, up at a campground he wasn't likely to make $200 over the summer with, and he would gladly sell it for that much. I got some condition information and it sounded like a good deal. We made an agreement, and he decided to deliver it to the house, although I would never expect this from anyone. Always assume you got to go get the unit or pay a good hunk of change for delivery. When it arrived, I noticed that the first thing I noticed was that the game slots were labeled red player, yellow player, blue player, green player. I was thinking to myself, I don't remember Gauntlet letting you be able to choose what player you wanted to be. You were already set. And then it dawned on me, I looked up at the marquee, and lo and behold, it's a Gauntlet II. I can't begin to explain in words, and I know anybody who owns an arcade game or multiple arcade games could agree with me. There is nothing to match the feeling of seeing the first arcade game sitting in your house. Moving it through the doors, I had to take all the hinges off the doors. I cut my hand open. I practically dropped the thing. These things are heavy, by the way. They look light, but they're not. They're very, very heavy. Moved it into the house. I fired it up, and to hear the Gauntlet track music and all that stuff, to play in the sound test and all that other stuff, you can't begin to imagine until you're actually there. So anyway, once I got it all up and running, of course I played it to death. I probably played it all day and all night. And the one thing that I did notice that the screen was kind of greenish, as it ended up turning out the blue component in the monitor was bad, and it turned out to be just a cracked PCB, and a quick solder jumper workaround got things taken care of. So it actually turned out to be pretty damn cool. Now, how I acquired my second game, Super Sprint, was an entirely different thing altogether. This was actually free. It turned out that as I was talking about Gauntlet to my coworkers, one of them said that her ex-husband was actually a video game collector himself. This was very exciting. As it turned out, I went to school with him, although we weren't friends or even acquaintances really in school. I knew who he was, he knew who I was, and we started talking shop. And at that point in time, after spending $2 on Gauntlet, I really didn't have any free spending money, so I told him, I said, hey, you ever get anything extra, control panels, boards, anything that you don't want or you can get rid of at a good price, you let me know. I'd be happy to take them off your hands for you. So one day he calls me and says, so, do you like free stuff? And I said, are you kidding me? Is a bullfrog's ass watertight? You know I love free stuff. He says, well, I got a Super Sprint machine up here. Somebody broke into it, tore off 2 of the wheels. I disassembled it, brought it up here, and dropped it off. I'm not going to have time to work on it. If you want it, it's yours for free. Just come get it. Needless to say, I was up there that afternoon. It was a disassembled mess. I borrowed a truck. It was ugly. It was another one of those Gauntlet things that was ugly to get it home, ugly to get it set up and get it reassembled because it was basically broken down to parade rest, if you know what that means. So I brought it all up. I was surprised to find out that it ran. Now, of course, I had to work the optical PCBs on the wheels and numerous other things. You can read about that on InsertCoin's webpage, what I had to do to restore it. But that was a good example of how to get it for free. Now, later on, I talked to the same guy again. We were chatting about how Super Sprint was coming along and whatnot, and he said that he had a Zybots machine in really good shape that was sitting at some combination arcade, bowling alley, espresso, blah, blah, blah type place, and really wasn't turning any bucks, and he said that they had the sound disconnected, but everything else was in great shape. If I wanted it, maybe we could trade me doing a little web page design for him in exchange for the unit. Well, being a big fan of barter anyway, I said great. So I got the truck and went over and got it. Now Zybots is tall. I mean, it's a good foot taller than Gauntlet probably was, and although it was really thin and easy to get in the doors, I'd come to find out that the sound PCB had something wrong with it. Although the sound CPU checked out and everything else seemed okay, I just couldn't get sound out of the thing. And as per talking about it earlier in the show, without having sound, I was kind of lack to play it. So I went ahead and kind of shelved it for a while until I met Mike here, who's doing the transcriptions for us. Anyway, he managed to score a great deal. He picked up some 20 arcade cabs for like $15 a piece, some working, some not working, and one of them happened to be a Zybots that he planned to gut and put a MAME unit in there, a PC and a monitor and whatnot. And since Zybots didn't have a monitor anyway, he figured, well, he's going to pretty much scrap the pieces. Nicely enough, he generously donated the board. Didn't even ask me to pay for shipping, which I offered that and more. And sure enough, as soon as I plugged that soundboard in, Zybots was up and running. So that was an exciting end to a potentially nasty situation. But the real trick, I think, behind it, especially for the small town folks like me who just, you can't nip over to a huge warehouse and go through and pick a game out and buy it, is to make friends with the local route guys. If you go to a 7-Eleven or a Circle K, whatever, and you see a game there, check for a sticker that says who owns the route. Give him a call. See if he's got any extra boards or controllers or whatnot. Go see his place. See what he's got to offer you. And you never know. He may have, like this guy did, a machine that wasn't making any money, make more money to sell it than it would leaving it running, and go from there. That's really your best bet. Now, if you're lucky enough to get to an auction or live in an area where you can get to an auction, that would be exciting. Most of the people I know have bought theirs from auctions or from other private collectors. So that's sort of my rundown on classic arcade game collecting at home. Certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to submit your questions to me at webmaster@monroeworld.com. I'd love to share my experiences and help you out with anything I can. now that I've had a little experience working on these guys, maybe I can help you out. Well, folks, it looks like we're about ready to reach our limit this week on Retro Radio. I appreciate you stopping by and hope you stop by again. Until next week when we bring you all the latest and greatest news, keep it retro.